Welcome to Season 3, Episode 58 of Brody Sports Talk. My name is Derek, and today we are talking about fantasy football. We'll be going over our leagues that we had this last week. We'll talk about some head to head matchup and some underdogs that come through the fantasy this week. But of course, I am joined by a couple of fantasy gurus. First is the points per episode king, good points per episode, really thought out points per episode, and that'd be Sean Morgan.
How's it going, everybody?
And the guy who knows how to win with players that are off the top of the scrap heap because he brought me on this podcast, and that's Caleb. Caleb, how you doing?
It's a good week. My fantasy leagues, similar to my Packers, probably got me about one good shot, and the rest of them were all bad. So I'm excited for a new week and to talk some more fantasy football.
The good thing is that each week starts over, except for those that lost their guillotine in the guillotine league and aren't playing anymore, and their players have gone to waiver wires. So let's start out with some recaps of the leagues that we are in. Let's go ahead and start out with Sean because he's awesome at fantasy football, and I need to learn as much as I can from him. Please tell me, Sean.
Yeah,
how do I win?
That's actually what I was pulling up here just a second ago. So I basically went 2-2, and if you want to count one of them as surviving in the Guillotine League, I feel like that's definitely a win. All three of us, just to spoiler alert, all three of us did make it in the Guillotine League. Some of us cut it a little closer than others, saved by the skin of your Tucker. I did not win the best ball matchup. Unfortunately, I was let down by a few key poor performers. And then, unfortunately, my opponent had Dak Prescott and Darren Waller, who had a monster of a game. I'm just glad that he didn't catch everything that was thrown at him. So he actually had 19 targets. God, can you imagine in a PPR league? Like, that's just that would be absolutely terrible. But no, my opponent had Tyler Lockett, had Antonio Brown. Despite some good performances by some of my guys, unfortunately, ultimately my wide receiver core let me down, which is a real risk with the way that I drafted. And it's unfortunate. I think that it's probably going to cause me a lot of problems throughout the season, that my wide receiver core is just not as good as I would like it to be. I did end up winning in our half PPR league, our 10-man half PPR league. It was actually not even remotely close because, unfortunately for my opponent, they ended up having a one Aaron Jones and a James Conner as their starting running back pairing, and then ended up putting Ronald Jones in one of their flex spots. So I think they had a total of less than 10 points between three players, all running backs. So it really didn't matter how my guys did. It was a smear, and I had some pretty good games. Hawkinson had a fantastic game. I think he's if anybody drafted him, I think he's going to have an excellent year. Actually, I believe that was my fantasy pick when we did the Lions preview episode, and I'm glad that was my go-to. Unfortunately, I did not win my opening game in my Money Dynasty League. A bit unfortunate. I also had a one Aaron Jones that let me down. And then despite the high-flying Bucs offense, Mike Evans was not the beneficiary of that. And as he is consistently a feast or famine wideout, in this case it was very much a famine, as was Cortland Sutton not really doing a whole heck of a lot with the Broncos win over the Giants. So it didn't really pan out for me there. But, that's the nature of the beast that is fantasy football.
Caleb, what about you? Want to recap how you did in your league?
So I'm in a couple of various leagues. So first and foremost, congrats to Hopsky Canoes for beating us in the podcast fantasy league. Unfortunately, we dropped the ball on that one. Granted, he didn't have that good of a week either, but he was good enough to beat us. So it stinks. Uh, we're coming out this week. We're going up against the guys over at Scotch and Sports. And I think that they're really scared because all of a sudden today, the other two hosts became co-owners of that team. And I was like, oh, really? You got to get all three of you in here to face, me, the guy who lost in week one.
Sounds like you got to get us in on this. Make us
I probably will. I'll send you guys invites
go through and drop everybody.
So speaking of best ball, I had some unfortunate outcomes for week one. I had Trey Sermon, who was a healthy scratch, which maybe with Raheem Mostert's injury, Sermon won't be a healthy scratch going forward. I am optimistic that he will actually be able to provide value. I also have Fitzpatrick in that league, and he is now out. So my quarterbacks, I have Josh Allen and Matthew Stafford, but I've got Josh Allen and Matthew Stafford and no backup. So it is super flex. So yeah, you want to at least have potential of getting two quarterbacks for sure in every week. The other thing is I had taken a flyer on Will Fuller, and he, of course, was still suspended this first week. So just not a good week there. I will say Darren Waller was actually the highlight of my fantasy week because he got me the win in my family league, where I was able to come from behind, courtesy of Darren Waller doing everything and then some. And it just made me really happy that I at least wasn't overly distracted, not too much fantasy haywire that has me distracted all over the place, because I did end up in 6 leagues, but I've got 1 W, and it's time to start going to the waiver wire, hitting up the trades, and making things better.
Well, great job, you guys. For me, I went 2-1 on, and then I survived the guillotine, of course. So I'll call that 3-1, even though Tucker bailed me out. I have said many times on this podcast that don't come to me for fantasy advice. I draft people who I just want to give a big hug to. And Sean makes fun of me about that. But, me and Patty Mahomes someday.
At least you have a draft strategy, right? It doesn't have to be a good one. You just have to have one.
Yeah, exactly. Whoever's going to give me the most points, that's a poor strategy. People that care about the community, people that shake the hands of the kids as they're going down the tunnel. That's true. Hands shaken per game, that should be a stat, because all my players, you couldn't come close to me. But I got a win in the league that I had last year that I was telling you guys about when we were talking about setting these up. So I over an actual team, someone who actually drafted and someone who did their best. And so I'm going to take that as the fantasy football win of the season, because normally I like watching football, and I like but these analytics pieces of football, I did not get into the analytics well enough to know exactly where the points are going to be. So I'm going to take my wins and I'm going to move on. And let's move on to our head-to-head for fantasy. And for our head-to-head, we have Robert Woods, Julio Jones, and Corey Davis. So we'll start off with you, Caleb. Who would you start of those three?
So they all, I feel like, have some upside and scare me a little bit. So Robert Woods I felt like he was the one that the Bears were primarily trying to shut down when they faced them in week one. And so you were able to see a lot of things going to Higbee and Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, or as I like to call him, Bobby Trees. He just wasn't getting open and getting the ball quite as much as I would have liked to have seen. I know that Corey Davis had a hot week one with Zach Wilson. It seemed like there's some chemistry there, which good for Corey Davis. I mean, he went and got some money after leaving Tennessee. And then speaking of someone in Tennessee, we've got Julio Jones. And I'm just like, what the heck happened last week? The Cardinals fully embarrassed you. And so right now, Corey Davis is currently a waiver claim. So keeping my fingers crossed that we will be able to get him. Otherwise, it's versus Jones. But I do think that there's some upside to all three. Sean, what do you think we should do on that one? This is for our team league that I'm going to add you guys as co-owners for.
I really do think, like, looking at, let me first say, I don't think that Julio Jones is in a very good situation right now until we actually see that Tennessee offense do something of substance. I feel like, I don't know how many times was he targeted in the Cards game, just out of curiosity. Because I'm looking at ultimately the distribution that Tannehill had. He had 21 completions, right? But the single highest number that anybody had is 4. And there were basically 16 passes that didn't get caught. So to me, that kind of spells out, especially, is this a half PPR or PPR league?
This is half PPR.
Okay. I'm a little less hesitant then with Jones because I still think he is a touchdown threat, but I actually kind of sort of like Corey Davis here. I feel, especially when you have a young quarterback, they develop that, if they have some early success, they develop that very positive relationship and positive rapport, feeling like they can count on that player. So I really do like that. That said, we just saw what a big, wide receiver can do against this Colts defense, and both Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf had absolute field days. So if I have to pick one of them, give me Bobby Trees. But I do think that Corey Davis is a very interesting and intriguing option, even if people think he's going to possibly, I don't say regress, or maybe come back down to the mean against the Patriots.
Just to be clear, our starting receivers are Stephon Diggs and Keenan Allen. So this is is our third option.
Oh, this is okay. I'm assuming like, so. Why? Then I feel much better about it. I feel much better. Yeah, man, I'm glad. Too bad this isn't a PPR league, because if you got Diggs and Allen, I'd be like, oh my gosh. I think they're probably going to finish like within the top 4 players in a PPR league for actual like reception count. So, man, okay.
Derek, do you have any insight on that one, or?
Yeah, so I'm going to follow up on saying Robert Woods is going to be the best this week. I put Julio Jones as third, like Sean did. I'm going to the Forest, and I want to see Bobby Trees.
The other one that we have came to us via Twitter from a user on there that's actually in some leagues with us. So hopefully this is useful information for you, and hopefully you don't use it to beat any of us. But it's user at _real_Stachy, which is STACHY. And he was asking who he should play at quarterback this week between Josh Allen and Matthew Stafford. I do know that in general, Josh Allen is going to be playing against the Dolphins. If they're going to be able to run the ball, it's probably going to be the Josh Allen show, which gives him a higher floor than I think many people would think of. But I also thought that Matthew Stafford and the Rams looked really, really good on Sunday against a Bears defense that's not actually bad. So I'm leaning Matthew Stafford, mainly because I feel like this matchup is just that good and it's too good to pass up, especially when you have both of those studs at quarterback. You're trying to figure out who you're playing every week. So Derek, let's go to you, and then we'll go back to Sean. Would you go with Josh Allen against the Dolphins or Matthew Stafford against the Colts?
I'm going to go Josh Allen versus the Dolphins. I think that he gives you more options to score points. And no, Stafford pick isn't bad at all. It was just between those two. I think that Josh Allen is going to score more points this week.
So I think it's kind of a coin flip. And I know you could immediately point to how good Stafford did at the, because at the beginning of his Rams career and say, well, he set the bar pretty high. He's just going to keep up that momentum. I feel like Allen may play a bit with a chip on his shoulder this upcoming week. And as Derek said, that could result in him deciding to maybe, tuck and keep it a few more times, get some touchdowns on the ground. We could see, a performance where it's like 2 touchdowns in the air, a touchdown on the ground, and maybe, it's Josh Allen, so there'll be some times where he wings it. So maybe we see, maybe a pick, maybe a fumble. I also wonder about the Rams' running game against the Colts defense. I know that Carson managed to do pretty well against that attack, but I still have a feeling that the Rams aren't super offensively balanced. And to me, I know the Colts aren't a super opportunistic defense. They kind of adopt this bend but don't break, style thing. So it's tough. I think ultimately you have to look at who is going to, try to play, I think, a bit more selfishly in that regard. Do you count on the Rams throwing it, 35, 40 times because their run game isn't there? Or do you count on Allen trying to do everything himself? So I'm actually not going to give you a specific pick. I want you to think about which of those two things you think is going to most likely happen and which of them you feel more comfortable in. So don't look at the players, look at the situation.
Professor Sean stepping up to the chalkboard. After class, I have an apple for you, Professor.
Nice. Although I did just eat, so.
Well, you can eat again. I mean, apples are not going to fade away in 35 seconds.
What type of apple is it? I don't mess with that red delicious crap. It ain't delicious.
Gala. There's only Gala in my house.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Tastes like gotta go with Granny Smith. Granny Smith.
Honey Crisp. A little Gala.
Honey Crisp.
Yeah. So, speaking of the apple of my eye, let's talk about the fantasy underdogs. I was trying to transition, and as best as I could come up with.
Did a good job.
Yeah. So I'm going to go first on my fantasy underdog this week, and that's going to be Damien Harris, the running back for the Patriots. They're going to the Jets, and he is going to be their primary running back for this game, and I think that they match up really well against the Jets. Stevens is still there as his backup, but I think that Damien Harris will be an RB2 in most leagues and will be kind of a sneaky points getter this week. Sean, let's go over to you. How about your underdog for the week?
By the way, I just want to reiterate, I actually like that Harris pick. I picked him up in a lot of leagues. I value him tremendously this season. I think he has a lot of RB2 upside in a lot of different matchups this year, especially with Mac Jones at the helm of that offense. So good on you for that one. And I'm going to return the favor by going with a Bronco, and I'm talking about Cortland Sutton. He had a very, very, very frustratingly quiet week one. As somebody who owns him in 2 leagues and started him in 2 leagues, he had a very frustratingly quiet week one. But I have full faith in him to pick it up in week 2. And the big reason for that is actually a very unfortunate one for the Broncos, but that's the injury to Jerry Jeudy. And, with that, to try to continue that momentum and continue that success in the air, I think Sutton's going to get a lot more looks. I think he has, for the most part, recovered from that ACL injury. And I know that could have probably impacted a little bit his week 1 performance, but it wasn't like he was off the field for these reps. So I think it was just a matter of, maybe he just wasn't, getting open or wasn't quite getting the breaks. I actually think he ends up with a touchdown. I think he ends up with between, depending on if you're in a PPR or half PPR league, I think he ends up with around between 4 to 7 grabs for a touchdown, maybe in the 70, 75 yard mark. If you think that's going to be better than any of your other wide receiver options or potentially in a flex spot, because there are a lot of, I think, really good wide receivers and potential like flex starters that have rough matchups this week. So look to Sutton to potentially assuage some of that risk and give you some decent points.
Well, that's a great pick, and always a good pick is any Denver Bronco ever. Even John Elway, you could see if he gives you any points this week. You should start him in the 2021 fantasy football.
I'll try to look, see if I can pick him up on the waivers.
Okay, maybe. So Caleb, get me out of my my Bronco haze here and tell me about your fantasy underdog for the week.
So I'm going with Leonard Fournette. I saw that he was consistently rated really low in overall rankings for this week, and I don't understand it. He is supposedly going to be taking a backseat to Ronald Jones again this week, but the Buccaneers are also facing the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons struggled a lot in week 1 against the Eagles, and facing the Bucs is not necessarily a great second match. I think that even if Ronald Jones does run a lot, they like to use multiple backs. Leonard Fournette is going to go out and have plenty of carries and possibly get that touchdown a la like Kenneth Gainwell did last week. So I think that, plus you never know, maybe Jones is going to fumble again and be in the doghouse for Bruce Arians another week. So I have a lot of upside in Leonard Fournette. I feel like he is someone who I feel would be a true RB2 this week. And when you see him down in the rankings somewhere around like 27, 28 for running backs, that's too low.
Sean, do you have any thoughts on Leonard Fournette?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm something about the Bucs running back like options are just, they have me so nervous, right? When you lose point, and I know that it wasn't Fournette who lost points, but when you lose points, you sometimes get this nervousness about like that particular stable at being able to, I don't know, like recover and have a decent game, right? They looked very, very average, and this Bucs offense really loves airing it out and is really ridiculously good at it. So I actually really, really like this because I think it's totally unexpected. I think the Falcons defensively are incredibly suspect, and this is I think a pick that I didn't foresee, but I actually really do think that, yeah, Fournette's probably... Well, in what situations would you be looking at Fournette? Just out of curiosity.
I mean, if you have him, you probably rostered him late, or maybe you are somewhat in the running back carousel of J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and all of the whatever has happened in Baltimore running back situation. I don't think typically that you drafted Fournette and you were like, yeah, this guy's my running back too. You were like, this guy might be a flex every now and then. I think if you have him, you would definitely play him. I think that he's at least 16 through 20 in terms of running backs this week.
No, and it looks like he, I just looked up something because I was kind of curious on it because I know that like I said, Jones ended up finishing with negative points. Fournette actually was on the field for 42 snaps, and that led the NFL at running back for week 1. So it's not even a matter of, he wasn't on the field. He was on the field. It's just for play calling reasons. He ended up maybe the fumble was a bit rough, and maybe that kind of impacted the play calling, especially with Brady looking at Leftwich like, hey, this is my team. This is my offense. You don't try to tell me what to do. That could have contributed a lot to the distribution of of passing to running plays. But no, I like it. I can dig it.
Well, great conversation, guys, on Mr. Fournette. And that brings us to the end of our fantasy episode. So, I want you to make sure and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. And if you can, leave us a 5-star review. Interact with the Brodies on our Twitter at Brody Talk. And send us some stardom or sit-em for your week so that we can talk about them on the podcast. You can find that link to our Twitter and all of our others, including some awesome merch, on our Linktree, linktr.ee/BrodyTalk. So on behalf of Caleb, let's go back one step. We're on YouTube now, guys. So that link is in our Linktree as well. We have done a great job. We have IT Master that is putting us up on YouTube nowadays. I am very, very happy with getting to see these wonderful faces of Caleb and Sean, and you should too. So go check out our YouTube. That's in our Linktree, linktr.ee/BrodyTalk. So on behalf of myself, with Caleb, and the volunteer, Sean, I want you all to do me a favor and have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.